Okay, so we've had our opening session in the Content and Culture Hub. Now we are ready for our session number 2 here. We talked about content for humanity. We talked about fake news. We talked about how branded content needs to work, how it's important to keep the brand message alive, how we don't want too much from an ad point, and it's about getting the right balance. And now it's all about how you leverage new content strategies, how you find creativity, where you look for content. So we've got another expert panel to lead that discussion. And our moderator for this one is Simon Francis, who is the CEO of Flock Associates. And I will let him take over and introduce the rest of the panel. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you.
First thing to understand, as a moderator, you get your panel to do all of the work. So I'm actually going to ask them to introduce themselves very briefly, just to kick us off. Coco, would you just give us a bit of your background, please?
I'm Coco Masters. I work for global communications at Nissan Motor. I'm based in London. My team is actually based in Japan at headquarters. I do content management and actually a lot of hands-on video production. One of the reasons, or actually benefits, of my being in London is that I can help the region, so Nissan Europe and NM UK, to better understand what the global strategies are and how to implement them with content.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Stefan Rylewski. I'm also in the automotive business.
Actually, we should just switch you two, just so there's no fighting, if we can.
No worries. We are both a Japanese brand, so
exactly.
we know how to behave. So I'm working for Toyota Europe, so the regional office, not the global office. So I'm in charge of sports marketing platforms content. So focusing mainly on motorsports and Olympics, Paralympics partnership. I've been in the company for 11 years. I must say it's a great time to be in the automotive business. I mean, from my side, for two things. Obviously, everybody now is kind of shifting to a mobility business, including us. And the second point is that we finally decided to become a global brand. And for regional office, that's another interesting challenge. So I'm glad to be here.
Super.
And I am Nicole Kane. I work with McDonald's, and I work in their global media group. And so doing a little bit of difference in terms of the content versus the media side that we'll be talking about.
So what we are going to talk about is sort of content and sort of creativity, something I'm really passionate about, and I hope you are too in the room. So we're going to do a couple of quick fire rounds along the panel, and then we're going to open it up to some questions for you guys at the end as well. So I'm going to start. You've got the mic, Nicole. I'm going to go with you sort of first. I'm just struck as, there's work streams everywhere talking about sort of data, and then there's this sort of content piece here. Kind of which is more important? Is content becoming more important, or is data more important?
So I think that they work together. It's not that one is more important than the other. I think they need each other in today's world. I think the data is going to help to influence the content that is created, because it's going to help you decide and understand the insights that are coming from the humans in order to inform the content. And then the content is required because that's how you're going to be able to persuade the person in that moment of persuasion in order to get them to take whatever kind of action or to think whatever it is as a brand that you want them to think.
What about you, Stefan?
So I agree. I think that obviously, I mean, data as enables all of us actually to tighten the process. So the use of data is actually helping all of us, brands, agencies, publishers, throughout the process to understand consumers, his behaviors, develop personal experiences. So that's all great. I think you still need the skills, the mindset, the tools to use this data and to convert it in creative, ideas, content, and media. So I believe that.
So you think both as well?
Both as well. I think the creative will still do the magic.
Yeah.
So whatever happens, you need creative minds to do the magic. I think the whole actually challenge, not only in advertising, is I think all men and machine, so data and creativity work together. And this is the future. How we ensure this perfect balance between those two dimensions.
So Coco, you've got a unique background of being a sort of a journalist and now working in this new role of creating the content. But Who do you think's doing it well? You know, who do you look at and think, you know what, that is cool. I really like what they're doing. Getting the data and the creativity, you know, with your understanding of both, you know, who do you think's doing it good?
Well, with obviously, like with data and content, they're not separable. You have to start with good data, as Nicole was pointing out, and talk about how you can get the best insight from that, and then the content will highlight what you need to do in order to create that human connection, to draw authenticity and like trust for the brand. And who's doing it well? There are a lot of people who are doing it well. If I take automotive, I could say that JLR most recently did a very good job with creating content for podcasts. As they were driving, people could listen with their families to these mysterious stories in the UK countryside. I thought that was very well done because it brought together people in their family context within the vehicle, and I mean, just in general, created very good content.
So storytelling, you
Yes.
think, is at the heart of a good content sort of strategy?
Storytelling that reflects very well the values of the brand, that people identify with the brand. So it has that you need to have authenticity. You can't just create something and just because it makes people smile or whatever. It could be extremely creative, as a standalone, but if it doesn't bring someone back to the brand, then you're losing that human connection, which you need, and that's why you work with the insight to begin with.
Stefan, who do you think is doing things well?
I think historically FMCG companies have been very good in terms of data-driven marketing. I mean, this is basically, I think, based on years in terms of integrating data all along the process. The Unilever, P&G, McDonald's, and so on. Actually, there is, I think, the Netflix and Spotify are also doing great. There is a quote which I'd like to mention. Let's see if I remember it. I think it's data inspires and gives an insight into the emotions that people are expressing. And I think this is from the CMO of Spotify. And basically for me, this equation has everything. Data, insight, people, emotion, expression. And I think those guys, through the recent campaigns, I think it was 2016, it has been a weird year, or, play this at my funeral. Kind of campaign. I think they are really, doing a great job in terms of, using the data from the users, but still converting in a very kind of simple, emotional way.
So, Nicole, what do you at McDonald's use the content for? If you imagine the whole customer journey from sort of awareness into consideration, sales, and then advocacy in a simple sort of model, where do most of your kind of creative media or your content strategies play on that customer journey?
Yeah, we're a unique brand because of the large footprint we have with all of our restaurants. Obviously, we're the largest retailer in the world. So we have a combination of how do you intersect them before they enter the restaurant, and then also how do you connect with them when they're in the restaurant. So if you go into our restaurants these days, many of you have probably seen the mobile kiosk ordering, or you'll see the digital displays for the menu boards. So all of that is telling stories inside of our restaurants and trying to illustrate the taste and quality of the food, the meaning behind it. So from my perspective, what I'm trying to do is trying to intercept them before they walk into the restaurant at that moment in time that's most critical, because we are an impulse category. Also then at the point after they've left a restaurant. So how do you get them to come back again? How do you get them to become advocates? So there are so many different content places that we can do that, be it through paid channels, through own channels, or other ones. But we do have that uniqueness of what can we do when we have 70 million people walking in our restaurant every day and get them at that moment as well.
So it's like a micro story, if you like, on a specific location and a specific time of day. So how do you produce or cope with that sort of amount of content that needs to be done? That must sort of stress the system a bit.
So luckily in media, I'm not the one who needs to worry about the content production of that. But, I think there's a lot of new solutions that are out there today. When you start to talk to, for example, dynamic creative content providers, as we try and get more personal with our connections, as we try and focus on mass personalization, there are just new opportunities out there in order to not have to spend an extremely long amount of time just to produce one really golden spot. There are opportunities and times you want to do that, and of course all of us as brands are doing that, but it's also about how you balance effectiveness and efficiency of producing really high quality content, with also just really relevant in the moment cultural content.
So let's talk about high quality ideas then. I think this is something that you and I would understand, Stefan, quite well, is sometimes it's difficult to channel big ideas, great ideas through an organization, because all of these content ideas, they're going to touch PR, they're going to touch advertising, they're going to touch all sort of different departments. How do you manage that within sort of Toyota, or from that you've seen from other clients? You know, how do you manage a great idea through this maze that can kill ideas?
So, let's say that, I mean, it's all down to processes, obviously, since we are a process company. But on a project base, I mean, we've got the process in place when it comes to campaign development to organize, you know, big ID sessions where basically we bring everybody to the table and they can contribute. So that's a kind of established process, and that's easy, and that's great. I would say that one of the key dimensions is obviously, I mean, regional versus local. Because we are a big production hub, so we push content out to the markets, hoping that, I mean, they will use it. I think that one of the key success is the framework. It's basically, you know, to have a clear content strategy, a clear, you know, brand tonality, visual identity to ensure that whatever content is produced, centrally, locally, I mean, it all contributes to the big piece.
And then another question for you, Coca, given your producer sort of background and your current role as well, is who should be the producer? Because there's so many people that could be the producer. There will be media owners out here who say, I'm the executive producer of this show. There will be media agencies who will say, actually, I'm the executive producer. There will be maybe a production company who will say, I'm the producer, and you would say, hang on, it says producer on my card. So who takes this unique role on different productions?
Yeah, I mean, it is very much production specific. But I do think it's very important for a brand, you know, if you're going to be creating content, to fully own it. I find that in our experiences at Nissan, sometimes we often kind of lose a little bit about the messaging, about the storytelling, and again, this notion of the authenticity of what we're trying to communicate when we outsource to a variety of different agencies and so forth. So obviously project size is a consideration. I can't do, I can't do a lot of things as an executive producer given, you know, my limited staff, because in London it's basically me and I have to hire crews and editors and all this sort of thing, you know, given the nature of the project. But I do work with other producers, with other executive producers, and then the agencies that we have. We're trying to narrow down how many agencies we actually work with, just so that we can better streamline the processes of creating content, making it more efficient, and also making it much more consistent than it has been in the past, because this feeds into trust. You have to have a consistent message, consistent brand identity, visual identity, and we're trying to reduce the players generally so that we can bring a better, more authentic sort of content to the consumer.
Stefan, whilst you've got the microphone, we'll come back to Nicole in a minute. You know, Toyota sponsor the Olympics, okay? It's a huge, huge global platform. How do you carve out what bit you should play in as a brand? Do you know what I mean? Which bit is, you know, the Toyota piece of the Olympics as opposed to all of the rest of the noise? You know, how do you decide strategically where you should play with content?
Yes. So first of all, I mean, just to, for us, it's a partnership.
Yeah.
So it's clearly, you know, a stage. I mean, we've identified to do two things, and I'll talk about it tomorrow. It's really a kind of catalyst for change within the organization. So moving to a kind of mobility company. And it's also a stage to showcase, you know, what our vision, let's say, of mobility for millions of people. I think there is an anecdote actually that, I mean, the focus for us was really Paralympics. And in order to get the Paralympics, we had to also
Yeah.
partner up with the Olympics. So I hope this will not be recorded. But this is just to highlight that, I mean, we truly see our contribution, in Paralympics and providing mobility solutions, with to people with disabilities. So this is how we see our contribution. And so it's not purely a marketing exercise. It's really clearly a kind of long-term platform. No, I think I've forgot your initial questions while I'm talking.
No, it's just deciding which place to play. Obviously you've selected Paralympics, but within that there's a number of different places where your content strategy could sort of apply.
Yeah, so actually it's beyond creating content. So the content, I mean, needs to drive inspiration to actually what we want to do. And what we want to do is, to bring to life the genuine purpose of ever better mobility for all.
Right.
So this is also, what we will
That's
bring to life in Tokyo 2020.
Right, super. Nicole, slightly different question for you, which is, whilst every media owner and every media agency and consultant is boffing on about kind of content, are we losing media innovation and media creativity? Fantastic context-driven advertising and smart out-of-home and brilliant press placements and, fantastic TV buying as everyone chases after the new things, do you think?
I think we are for a certain extent. I think in today's world with data and all of the platforms that you can use, such as programmatic, there are certain people who start to think, well, media is just an efficiency play. It's just about finding the cheapest way to get in front of eyeballs. But what tends to happen when you do that is you lose the effectiveness piece of it. So I think the reason that what you're saying comes into play is when you find the right context, when you find the right person, you find that moment in order to get their attention, that's when it's all going to come together. And that's where I think there are a lot of opportunities today in media and in innovation and the different things that are coming forward. So technology is going to allow us to get into those moments that matter for the people. And that's when you're going to be able to make a personal connection. I mean, even just having mobile today, even though some of the ads are about this big and they're hard to see, it's a personal device. So if we can figure out and harness the power of mobile and really understand how to connect with a person, there can be huge innovation in media, I think, from that perspective.
Super, thank you. I think the other thing is then, I'd just like to ask is about how do you sort of find the right talent and then incentivize them and reward them, whether that's an agency, whether it's an independent production company, how do you reward that innovation and creativity? You don't have to go into the detailed KPIs of the comp scheme for your agencies, of course, I'm not asking that, but how do you try and encourage that creativity and innovation?
I mean, I think some of it is about having a brand that people are passionate about and want to work with and getting them to feel like as a consumer, how are they going to take this innovation and make it a better experience for themselves? So if they can have that personal relevancy in the experience, I think that's going to help to keep them excited and motivated versus just another project that's on their list.
Interesting. Stefan?
When it comes to talent within organization, I think that's actually one of the key challenge that we face as brand organizations. I mean, kind of creativity is everywhere, and to me, we've not yet moved as creative organizations. So we truly need to find ways to indeed create the conditions, for people to express their creativity within the organization beyond the kind of immediate tasks.
It's sort of especially true in automotive, isn't it, where people go from product planning to sales, they come into marketing for maybe a 2-year sort of period, but they don't have the content background perhaps of yourself. So honestly, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have a good career path through the organization and stuff? Because some people in autos and in other companies, here, who are content specialists, can't see the way through.
Yeah, I'm a content person.
Yeah.
And I think I'll remain so. But going back to how we reward people who have good ideas or who generate good creative ideas, if it's like a crew that I work with and, they're efficient, they have great sensibility, it's a pleasure to work with them, then we'll work with them again. I think that's pretty much the only way that we can reward them.
You're lucky
if they're
to work with us. And if you're really bad, you work with us 3 times.
That's kind of how it is at this point. But within the company, for instance, this reminded me of a campaign that I thought was a very good piece of content because it was derived from an insight that we had asked car owners kind of what they wanted from their vehicles. And so it was a survey that we did in partnership with an organization of pet owners. And about 1,300 people responded. About 90% of them said that they wanted their cars to be more pet-friendly. So what Nissan Europe ended up doing is really creating X-Trail for dogs. Mm-hmm. And so they put together like a little explainer with like the rear cameras so you can see your dog getting into the car, and all of these different things that would allow pet owners to have a better time out in the countryside with their animals. And that went on our level of popularity for views for a video that basically went viral. And so it was really rewarding for everybody in that sense that we took a good piece of insight and someone had a great idea saying, well, let's apply it, And I think it's that sort of spontaneity sometimes and that sort of understanding the product, then understanding what kind of insight we're able to apply and how, and then just rolling with it and see what happens.
If I pass it on to Stefan, I'd like a quick question for you. Long-form content, right? So I was lucky enough in the past in a different career to make sort of, TV series and full-length sort of features and things like that, whereas there's obviously a big focus on quite short-form sort of content devices at the moment. Do you see it coming at a stage where sort of companies like Toyota will primarily invest in long-form content, in long-form films and TV series, or do you think it's going to be much more vignettes and episodes?
Well, there is clearly, depending on your objective, a place for every type of length and content and so on. I think it's still something, not from the past, but a tendency, especially from an agency, to sell you, let's do this great long form, and everybody loves, emotionally engaging, beautifully crafted piece of film, so that's great. But for me, I think we need to move into actions. I mean, we as a company take lots of actions, and to me, it's more valuable to actually document in the long form the type of actions that you could take as a company than just, trying too hard to create a long form piece of film that, is trying maybe to tell a story. Mm-hmm. But I mean, to the second part of your question, I think there is, the Netflix, let's say, recipe is so successful that I think it's also every big brands would want to put an episode out there with a great piece of storytelling. So that's obviously something also we are looking at, and that's opening up also lots of different ideas.
Nicole, anything on long form from a McDonald's side of things or your category point of view?
Yeah, I think it's really about what's the best combination in terms of the package of assets you're building for the specific business objective and what you're trying to achieve. So, we're doing a lot of tests with 6-second bumper ads, and we're seeing great success. And those work great when you just need to get one quick message out. Everyone knows the golden arches, so we don't need to worry about that. But if you're really trying to do an emotional play and really tell a story and get people to change perceptions, that 6-second might not be the best. So I think it's really what's that combination, and that's what a lot of research is showing today, is you probably need multiple links in order to deliver the entire experience.
Understand. So just a quick round across, and then we might turn it over to some questions from you guys, so you can prepare yourselves with your questions. I was just showing the guys before some of the, I don't know if you've seen Deadpool 2, the content work that Deadpool 2 are doing at the moment. Just search for Deadpool 2 David Beckham if you want a giggle later on.
Can you show it on the screen?
I can't show it on the screen, no, but are there things that are outside of advertising or outside of your category, bits of content that you've seen that you think you can borrow the learning from, find a great insight or nurture an idea? Have you seen just a story that's out there? It doesn't have to be an advertising story that you think is doing well.
I mean, it's not a Toyota employee speaking, but as a personal point of view, I think partnerships actually with artists.
Yeah.
I think some brands, again, Uniqlo, maybe Spotify, of course it's linked with the core business. I think they are doing some great stuff. I think obviously some artists, they've got certain values, a message to convey, and I think this is also
can make for a rich story, can't it?
There are so many rich stories and great partnership we can get.
Coco, do you want to have a go?
I can't. There are a few examples I have in my mind specifically, but I think just overall, I'm really impressed by people who are creating content that's much more interactive than it has been in the past, and I think that the company Nissan needs to move toward using more AR, more VR, more engagement on mobile, because it's, automotive is a fairly staid, somewhat conservative industry, and I think that, anyone who's gone to a motor show kind of knows that we have a lot of potential to just completely revamp the way that we do even presentations. We can make them more interactive and more informative, and all of these things can only help the brand. So I think that in terms of the content, it would be great to actually start utilizing more of these tools to create that enhanced experience for the viewer.
Yeah. Some of the things from fashion and Burberry have done some amazing stuff, haven't they, with content? Nicole?
I can't think of a brand per se top of mind, but I think the brands who are taking advantage of cultural relevancy are doing some really interesting work. So being attuned to what's interesting in culture and then being able to take your brand personality and play into that can sometimes get to some really interesting content these days.
I think it's a good build. Okay, so questions from the floor. Anyone got any? I've got some more for the panel if everyone's feeling shy. There we go, we've got the mic. Oh, round the bean bags.
Hi, my name is Takara and I work at Adobe, and I really like the conversations that you guys are having because we are really kind of focused on how does the Creative Cloud fit with our DSP, which is Ad Cloud. One of the things that we talk about as we flesh out this product further, which is adding programmatic elements to creative and really helping to streamline the process from an approval standpoint, is what do we want to make sure that we don't lose with the product, and sort of governance is like one piece, right? So we need to make sure there's the approval process in place as we give control to the marketers. So my question for you guys is, as we think through how tech can help creative, what are those areas that you don't want to lose and that you think about?
So if I understand it right, it's about through the approval process and stuff, where can tech help out, and what would you never lose control of, if you know what I mean, which you have to have control of?
Process, just when you start to innovate tech and creative, what do we want to make sure that we keep as we continue to push it forward, the two forward?
Well, for me, there is a strategic decision. So there are certain objectives and strategic decisions that should be kept at the brand level. So obviously, along the process, data will inform whether you're in the right direction or not. But ultimately, as a brand, as a company, obviously you perform lots of different analysis, but you are in the driver's seat when it comes to kind of the strategic decisions that needs to be taken.
Yeah, I think I don't have a specific example in mind, but as long as you just keep focused on the business objectives and make sure that whatever the final outcome is in terms of content reflects authenticity and definitely maintains that or builds on that trust that you need with the consumer. I think that anything in between, all the tools, because there's so many tools and so many more tools all the time, anything that gets you closer to that is used. It's great to use.
Any other questions? Any more? No? I've got, there we go. Attilio.
Hi. Just one question. Apparently, it's not so easy to develop the right content. It requires a lot of work. How do you measure success in terms of content? Which are your KPIs, your objectives in that area? Thank you.
Nicole, do you want to have a go first?
Yeah, I don't know if our KPIs are different just for content or if they're the KPIs for an entire campaign. So I think it goes back to what was the business objective, and hopefully you're setting those KPIs up front. So be it a business-specific KPI, such as guest counts in a restaurant, or is it a brand health type of a KPI of changing perception? So I think because content and connections need to work together, they're really all responsible for driving and building that KPI together.
Just to add to that, though, I think that Nissan is still very much working toward exactly how to measure that. So what I hope that we're able to do in the future more is use the data that we get from the response that we have to a particular piece of content or campaign and then feed back into that process, because it's something that we don't do enough of now, at least maybe in the region, but not at a global level. So.
I think there's some interesting models that are out there where I've certainly done them in the past, deals which have been sort of just pure pay-per performance. So there's an advertiser, it's not in this room, but we arranged a deal which was sort of a cost per engagement. So they effectively got commissioned, the content producer, for the level of engagement that they drove, rather than they promise you a viral movie that's going to reach billions of people and then actually it reaches 2,000. They were actually incentivized heavily to drive the engagement and use their connections themselves to do that. So there are ways of linking the performance, the incentivization and the measurement together. Is that something you've had experience of? You've all sort of had sort of goes with that. Can I just ask about influencers? So you've probably all worked with influencers in some way. Do you give them full control when you're doing the content, or is it heavily sort of shepherded in your different companies? Because I've seen different success stories and disaster movies at the same time. Do you want to go first, Coco, or Stefan? You've got the mic.
I mean, so we don't use them a lot, but we give them full control.
Okay.
But
We use them a lot, and we're very hands-on, I think.
Nicole?
One thing that I think is interesting with influencers today is it's hard to tell when a brand has actually hired them to be part of a campaign and when they're influencers who are just talking about a brand. And I think it's a hard, blurred line. And for consumers, they don't know the difference. So it can be a touchy area when it comes to influencers and really what boundaries they have that are different than any editorial property that's out there today.
Yeah, I think certainly in our work we see this word influencer becoming like another one of those words like content was 2 or 3 years ago, that everyone's talking about it and it's ill-defined and the disciplines are emerging. We've got 3 different companies looking at it in different sort of ways. I guess that'll be something, in that advocacy part of the customer journey that will evolve as well. Are there any other questions from the floor? Is anyone feeling sort of inspired or brave enough now? Here we go.
I want to pick up on something you said, Nicole, that media not just being an efficiency play, but thank you, an effectiveness play. How do you find that balance, and how do you ensure your agencies find that balance? Because as a media owner, when you get briefed and you come up with content ideas, the challenge we find is that measurement around how do you, we're so obsessed with the lower funnel performance marketing that it all goes back to views. So how do you find that right balance between effectiveness and efficiency, and how do you work with your agencies to ensure they're doing that as well?
Yeah, I think in that situation, it's about setting up potentially a test and learn situation or setting up the right measurement framework, because we could pay 3 times the CPM on something, but if it drives a higher level of whatever the outcome we want, I'm okay paying a higher CPM. So, but you have to have the right measurements set up in place in order to be able to measure that outcome and have the data to demonstrate that paying more is actually getting you more in the back end.
Along the floor, anyone? Anything to add? So I think there's another point, which is where do ideas come from? Okay, which is something we've talked about. They can come from a creative agency, a PR agency, a media owner, all in. Do you have a preference, or how do you filter them all and screen them all as they come through? Nicole, do you want to have a go?
Sure. The way that we work at McDonald's, it varies across our different markets and our different regions of how that gets approached. We have some agency setups where everyone is extremely integrated and it doesn't matter who came up with the idea, it's about the fact that the idea came up. We have other situations where it is more siloed. I think at the end of the day, one of the things we're trying to work towards is just one common insight that everyone can work off of and then explore from there so it doesn't feel like it's a desperate process.
Yes, so at Toyota, I would echo that. I think also from kind of partners' point of view, it's fully integrated, media, advertising, PR, and so on, and also agency client. I mean, we basically are in the same offices. So clearly, you know, there is ongoing discussion, exchange of ideas, and we work that out together. I think where we need to improve is, you know, within organization again. I think these are gold mines of ideas because people know what's happening. They just have their daily task. And also from a consumer point of view, there are so many great inside stories. So it's just a matter of putting the process together, you know, all of this, which I think is something we need to work on.
Yeah, not very different, I think, from what you guys have said. We have just tried to make sure that whatever ideas kind of, you know, are discussed meet certain parameters, you know, like audience-led or digital-first and campaign-driven and these kinds of things.
You say that, but a lot of people, they're valuable, right? And a lot of people don't do that. So you're good at this, so you're just trotting them out. But they're important, I think. You know, a lot of people don't filter them in that way.
We're working toward that, yeah. I mean, we want to make sure, again, that what ideas we do have, again, are digitally led, consumer-focused, campaign-driven, which is still something that I think Nissan needs to work on, in the sense that it's easy to come up with it's relatively easy to come up with a campaign if you've got a new car launch or you've got a facelift, they call it, for a certain model, but it's more difficult to not have an event or not have something that's kind of in the calendar and say, like, this is the story that we would like to tell from a global perspective, and then convince the regions that this is an important story which reflects on building, you know, brand identity and bringing our consumers closer to who we are. So those are the kinds of ideas I think that we would love to have more of, and so it's really just a matter of having people sit down, given an opportunity and the time, if we have it, to brainstorm, you know, what are some of the things that what do we want to talk about, you know, and what is relevant. And right now we have kind of an umbrella of that in what is called like Nissan Intelligent Mobility. So it's intelligent power, which is the electric vehicles, it's intelligent driving, which is the autonomous drive stuff that we have, which is being integrated into all of our lineup, and then the intelligent connectivity, which is kind of our grid issue. And so we have something that at least creates some structure for us to do some, you know, brainstorming around it, but it's, again, we have yet to launch, I think, you know, recently a good, strong global campaign that we can allow the, you know, regions have fun with in that way, so.
So I think those frameworks are important then. We've done some for clients where we say, look at all of your content, there's got to be a few sort of touch points or rules about it. It's got to be mobile up, built from the mobile up, and social in. It's got to have some social utility built into and a series of frameworks. That sounds like it's going to be important in the future then. So I'm just going to ask you briefly then, just as we close it down, your views of the future. You know, is creativity and content going to be more important in the future? What are the big things that you see happening in the future? So you're kind of just a couple of minutes just to close it down with what do you think the future of creativity and content holds?
To me, it lies in the way the machine and the man is being used, because this is beyond advertising. This is, you know, artificial intelligence, everything. I mean, we've just seen a cyborg on stage in the morning. Great story, by the way. So it's really how this kind of combination is going to work to actually respond to, you know, how society is evolving and to move society forward. And also I think that brands' role within this need to evolve. So it's not just about, I mean, it's belonging to the, you know, the belonging society again. That was mentioned this morning. So how brands can, you know, contribute, not only contribute, but play a meaningful role in all of this.
Super. Nicole?
I think one thing you're going to see is fragmentation in the media landscape is not going to slow down, and consumers' attention spans are just going to continue to lose time that they can do this because there's so much more out there. So I think what you're going to start to see is more emerging lengths of content, as we talked about, different formats specific to an individual channel, so you can really stand out and be relevant at that channel level. I think the days of just doing one TVC that can run across everything are completely done, so it's going to make it a lot more challenging for those content producers.
Okay.
No, I mean, to that point, I completely agree. I think that the relationship that a brand has with whatever audience they're directing their content toward will have to be enhanced. You're going to have this dialogue that we've already seen started in social media, but you will actually, as a brand, be a much stronger player in that dialogue, I think, than we have seen in the past. So, like you say, like creating content specifically for that target audience as they become much more fractured, it's going to be a huge challenge.
Super. So all it remains is to say thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much to the expert panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Simon, Coco, Nicole, and Stefan. Thank you very much. Enjoy. There's a round of applause for the panel and Simon moderating brilliantly there.